Hello, I'm Ardell. At dinner, my sister threw hot tea in my face because I wouldn't hand her my credit card. But that wasn't the worst part. The truth? She'd been quietly draining my name for years, stealing, lying, even rewriting our mother's will. They cut me out of family photos, out of birthdays, out of the very house I paid for. How did I stay silent so long? And why did no one ever ask what really happened that night? Dinner was supposed to be simple. That's what I kept telling myself on the way over, clutching the homemade salad I'd prepared, the one nobody ever really eats. A courtesy dish, like my presence, like most of what I've done for this family. It was a cool September evening in Columbus, the kind where the sun sets early, but the air still smells like summer trying to hold on. I pulled up to my mother's house, our childhood home, though I've long stopped calling it mine, and parked in the same cracked spot on the driveway I always did. The porch light flickered like it always had. Nothing changes here, not even the parts that should. Inside, the kitchen buzzed with noise, wine glasses clinking, kids shrieking down the hallway, Leora's laugh, loud and performative, carving through the air like it always does when she knows she has an audience. My mother, Velma, sat at the head of the table, regal in her silence, wine glass already half empty. Leora hovered over the table like it was a stage built just for her. "You're late," she said, smiling like a snake. "Hope you brought something more useful than that rabbit food." I set the bowl down, without a word. Dinner went the way these things usually do. Leora recounting some drama about her assistant messing up a client file. Mom nodding dutifully, the kids tapping at their phones. I picked up my plate, trying to shrink into my chair, trying to stay invisible. But I never could stay invisible around Leora. Not when I refused to play my part. "Actually," she said, stabbing her fork into the air like a conductor, "I've got a thing at work. Conference in Nashville. You can spot me the hotel. I'll Venmo you when the invoice clears." I blinked. "What?" "You know, just charge it. Your credit card, like always." I shook my head. "I can't do that this time." The room stilled a little. The background noise, forks, footsteps, even the fridge's hum, seemed to dull. "What do you mean you can't?" she said, still smiling, though her eyes sharpened. "You're not broke, are you?" "It's not about that," I said calmly. "I just don't want to," she scoffed. "You wouldn't even have that card if it weren't for me telling you how to build your credit in the first place." That wasn't true. But truth doesn't matter in my family, not when Leora starts performing. And let's be honest, you're barely using it. You live like a hermit. No man, no kids, no house. What do you need money for? I stood up slowly, trying to hold on to my dignity, like a thread slipping through my fingers. "Leora, I said no." And then it happened. She grabbed her mug, one of those oversized ceramic ones still steaming, and flung the contents right into my face. It wasn't a full cup, but it was hot enough. The sting hit my cheekbone, the side of my neck, and soaked the collar of my blouse. My fork dropped. The kids gasped. I didn't scream. I just froze. Silence. My mother, still holding her wine like a prop, barely blinked. "Don't upset your sister," she murmured. "She's had a long week." I looked around the room. Nobody moved. Nobody said a word. My niece, sweet thing, hesitantly passed me a napkin, eyes wide. Her father muttered, "It's just tea." Just tea. I blotted my skin, trying not to tremble. It wasn't the burn that hurt. It was the way they all sat there, watching, like this was an uncomfortable commercial break they had to sit through before the program resumed. I excused myself. The ride home was silent. No music, no tears. Just the sound of tires on pavement and the faint hiss of betrayal still ringing in my ears. My neck stung where the tea had landed, but inside? Inside felt worse, because this wasn't new. This was just the first time it left a mark everyone could see. At a red light, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Hair pulled back in a bun, the stain on my collar already drying into a memory. I touched my cheek, not sure whether the warmth came from the tea or the humiliation. "That's the last time," I whispered. Not a threat, not a vow, just truth. By the time I made it home, the street was quiet, and my neighbor's porch lights had already flicked off. I left my coat on the hook by the door, stepped out of my shoes, and let the silence wrap around me. It was past midnight, but I didn't crawl into bed. I sat on the edge of the couch, lights off, staring into the dim room like it held answers I hadn't earned yet. The next morning, the light from the window slid across my kitchen table. I stood by the sink, letting the water run over my hands longer than necessary. The skin on my cheek was still a soft pink. The memory of last night burned into it like a reminder. Not just of the tea, but of everything before it. That wasn't the first time Leora asked for my card. I'd handed it over more times than I cared to count. Gas for her SUV, a last-minute dress for a fundraiser, a hotel room when she claimed her work expenses needed a backup. She never paid me back. She always said she would, and I never asked. My silence had been my signature. My guilt? My currency. I used to think helping made me good. Useful. If I gave enough, maybe I'd finally be seen as something more than the extra chair they never needed at the table. But this time, I said no. And for that, I got burned. It wasn't the physical sting that stuck with me. It was that familiar sinking weight. Like I'd violated an unspoken contract. Like I'd forgotten my place. I sat down with a cup of coffee I didn't really want and stared out the window. Across the street, the neighbor's dog barked at a squirrel. Normal life happening in parallel to mine, like we were existing on two different channels. The sound of my phone vibrating on the counter snapped me out of the fog. A message from Leora. You need to grow up and stop acting like a victim. You embarrassed Mom. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement. Just another version of the same script she'd been reading off for years. I deleted the message without answering. I pulled out my laptop and opened a blank document. I stared at the screen for a while before typing the title, Receipts. No plan yet. Just the start of something. Maybe a record, maybe protection, or maybe just proof, for myself, that it wasn't all in my head. As the cursor blinked, my mind drifted to another night I'd buried deep. It was 8 years ago. Dad's retirement dinner. A fancy restaurant downtown. White tablecloths, printed menus, the whole production. Leora organized everything, of course. She picked the venue, the food, the playlist. When I arrived, there was no seat for me at the family table. Leora looked me up and down like I was the help. Oh, can you just help with drinks? We're running behind. So I did. I poured wine, cleared plates, and avoided the gaze of distant relatives who couldn't quite remember my name. Leora gave a toast that night. She raised her glass and said, "Everything we are is because we show up for each other." Everyone clapped. I stood near the kitchen entrance, out of sight, out of mind. At one point, I whispered to myself, maybe next year, I'll be part of it. I never was. Later that same night, I heard her talking to a cousin from New Jersey, loud enough that she wanted me to hear. "I'm the one carrying this family. Ardell just freeloads." I laughed when she said it. Not because it was funny, but because if I didn't, I would have cried. She didn't see me setting up the slide projector. She didn't see me pay for the Uber for Aunt Rosie when her car broke down. She didn't see any of it. And when you're invisible long enough, even you start to forget you exist. Back in the present, the coffee had gone cold. I dumped it in the sink. I grabbed my planner from the side table and opened to a blank page. I started writing down dates, not just the money, the moments. Every time I'd said yes, every time I'd been told to be quiet, every time my mother told me to be the bigger person, which always meant the silent one. This wasn't revenge, not yet, but it was a start. And for once, I wasn't waiting for permission. 3 days passed. Not one message from Mom, not a single check-in from Leora, not even to justify what she'd done. I wasn't surprised. That kind of silence wasn't new. It was the same silence that followed after every insult they dressed up as concern, every holiday I spent watching from the sidelines. But this time, something had shifted. The old numbness had weight to it, a heaviness I didn't want to carry anymore. I was in the middle of cleaning out old paperwork from a drawer near the front door, mostly junk, expired coupons, bills already paid, when the email came through. Credit alert. Suspicious activity on your account. I paused. At first I thought it might be spam. Then I saw the logo. It was from my actual bank. My breath hitched as I clicked the link and logged in. Overdue payment notices, new credit inquiries, a department store card I didn't recognize, opened 6 months ago under my name. I hadn't opened any new accounts in over 2 years. The address on file? My parents' house? The one Leora still bounced in and out of like it was hers. A knot started forming in my stomach. I called the bank, tried to keep my voice calm even though my hands were shaking. The woman on the line was polite, professional, and efficient. She pulled up my file, confirmed multiple charges, new purchases, a maxed-out card in my name. Then came the bombshell. She had a scanned receipt on file for one of the big-ticket items, a flat-screen TV. She emailed it over. I opened the attachment, and there it was, Leora's handwriting, her swooping L's and dramatic slant. She'd forged my signature, signed for something using my name like it was a costume she could wear whenever it suited her. I sat down hard on the edge of my bed, the printed receipt trembling in my hand. I didn't even care about the TV. It could have been socks. It could have been dog food. What broke me was the betrayal, the audacity, the fact that she knew I wouldn't check, that she counted on it. I opened my laptop and pulled up the receipts document I'd started just a few days earlier. Line by line, I began typing. Flat screen TV, $1,399. Store card opened without consent 6 months ago. Charges flagged. 5 in total signature. Forged. I paused, then added 2 words in bold, criminal behavior. Then I kept going. Gas for Leora, 5 times. Groceries for Mom, weekly last summer. Dental bill for Mason, $640. Her son, dress for gala, she had to attend, $198. New tires for her SUV. You don't want me driving the kids around on bald tires, do you? $780. All of it came back like pieces of a puzzle I didn't even know I was building. I hadn't kept receipts back then. I didn't think I needed to. I trusted her. And when I didn't trust her, I trusted my family to notice. To stop her. They never did. Once, when I'd mentioned the money to Mom, just in passing, she waved her hand and said, "Oh, Leora's always been a bit dramatic. Don't keep score. It's family." That was the moment I stopped asking for fairness. I just handed over the card and swallowed whatever pride I had left. But now I opened my journal, flipped to an old entry from last year. Am I being used or just convenient? I stared at the sentence. The ink had faded slightly, but the pain in it hadn't. I ran my thumb along the edge of the paper, then closed the journal. No more convenience, no more silence. I drafted an email to the bank's fraud department. Halfway through, I stopped. Something about sending it electronically didn't sit right. Leora was tech-savvy. She knew how to dig through emails, check shared cloud folders, even hack an account if she wanted. I didn't trust that this would stay between me and the bank if I sent it online, so I printed everything. Hard copies, evidence. I stapled them together and slid them into a folder I labeled by hand. Legal. It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet. But it was a step, a declaration, a private protest against a woman who'd spent decades convincing everyone I was the crazy one, the lazy one, the ungrateful little sister who just needed to try harder. I looked at myself in the mirror across the room. My reflection didn't flinch this time. The pink mark on my cheek from the tea had faded, but something else had taken its place. Something sharper. Not rage, not even sadness. Resolve. She crossed a line, I said out loud, barely recognizing the steadiness in my own voice, a line she couldn't charm her way back over. The rain had stopped sometime after midnight. I remember that because I sat at the kitchen table long enough to hear it taper off, first a drumming, then just a whisper against the window. I'd stayed up organizing the folder I'd labeled legal, but I hadn't touched it since I zipped it into the bottom of my bag. It was strange. For once, I wasn't scrambling to justify my anger. I didn't need to write another journal entry to talk myself down. I just needed sleep. And space. By Wednesday evening, I had both, until my cousin Dana texted me. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Leora's big night." My chest tightened. Big night? What big night? I scrolled through Dana's message again, slower this time, then flipped over to Facebook. The first post on my feed was from Mom. Proud of my firstborn, our rock, our glue, our everything. Join us tonight to celebrate all she does for this family. There was a banner in the photo. I squinted, then clicked. It read, "Appreciation Night for Leora." The picture was taken inside my house, the one I owned, the one I had rented back to the family when I moved into the apartment to regroup. No one had told me. I stared at the post for a full minute. Not a message, not a call, just a banner, just applause. That house still had my name on the deed, my name on the insurance, my name on the loan. But somehow they managed to throw a party there and honor her like she built it brick by brick. I didn't reply to Dana. Instead, I slipped on a jacket, tucked the folder into my shoulder bag, and drove. The house glowed warm against the blue dusk when I pulled up. Cars lined the driveway. Balloons bobbed gently on the porch railing. I parked a block away and walked the last bit on foot. My palms itched. My breath steadied itself, almost too calm. I didn't use the front door. I used my key and entered through the back like I was the help. The smell of catered food wafted from the kitchen. Garlic bread, pasta, those overpriced little meatballs in brown sugar glaze. Laughter echoed from the living room. And there it was. The banner. "Thank you, Leora." Someone had propped framed photos on the mantel. Leora at church events, Leora with her kids, Leora posing in front of a sold sign like she had bought the house. None of me, not a single photo. I scanned them twice. Even the photo of Dad's old retirement dinner. My hand was cropped out of the frame. In another, the graduation photo I remember hanging in my old bedroom, Leora wore my sash, the one I'd earned. My name had been whited out. I don't know what I expected. Aunt Rosie stood near the punch bowl, laughing a little too loud. "She's basically the one who bought this place," she said to no one in particular. My mother, leaning beside her, waved her hand in that way she always did when she didn't want to lie, but didn't want to tell the truth either. Well, she's earned it. I walked slowly past them, unnoticed. I didn't say anything. I just filmed. Each banner, each frame, the cake with her name, the guest book someone had left on the coffee table, and the envelope. It sat near the stack of party favors, half tucked under a placemat. My name printed on the upper corner. Property tax notice. Still under my address. My signature, not Leora's. I took it. I slipped it into my bag the same way I'd slid my dignity under my breath for the last 10 years. Quietly, like it didn't matter to anyone but me. I moved through the house like a ghost. I wasn't crying, I wasn't shaking, but something inside me was reshaping. They hadn't just erased me. They replaced me. I paused at the hallway mirror before leaving. Fixed my hair, straightened my collar, smoothed the line of my jaw with the back of my hand. When I stepped out the front door, I did it slowly. Nobody looked up. Nobody asked where I'd come from, and that was fine. I walked to the sidewalk, then to the car, and I smiled. Not the kind you wear for photos, but the kind that slices. That would be the last party they ever threw in my name. I didn't go home right away. I drove past my apartment complex, circled the block twice, and finally pulled into the lot of a diner that stayed open past midnight. I didn't go in. I just sat in my car, the engine off, windows fogging, the quiet too loud to ignore. My hand stayed on the wheel long after I'd parked, as if I needed to feel something solid that hadn't been taken from me yet. Somewhere between the silence and the low hum of a truck passing on the highway, I realized I didn't feel angry anymore. Not in the way I used to. Not the sharp, hot kind that wanted to scream or throw something. This was different. Like my body had absorbed every betrayal and now carried it like scar tissue. No longer bleeding, just thick and permanent. By Saturday afternoon, the air had cooled again. Autumn was creeping in without permission, like Leora. The kind of cold that wasn't sharp, but slow and steady. The type that made your bones feel older than they were. I hadn't planned on going to the house again. I only wanted to pick up an old quilt and some mortgage papers I'd filed away in my childhood closet. Simple, in and out, quiet. But the driveway told a different story. Rows of cars, laughter spilling out through cracked windows, a balloon caught in the wind, tugging against the porch railing. I paused at the curb and checked the address, not because I doubted it was mine, but because everything about it felt like a stranger had moved in and hung up new wallpaper. I slipped around the side and used the key. Same lock I'd installed 2 years ago. Same creak in the back door hinge. Different world inside. Streamers, trays of hors d'oeuvres, folding chairs. People I hadn't seen since high school sipping white wine and calling my sister a force. A banner stretched across the living room wall in gold lettering. Thank you, Leora, for everything you've built. My feet didn't move right away. The words hit like a slap, not because they were loud, but because they were stolen. I'd built this house. I paid the down payment. I negotiated the interest rate. I fixed the leaky pipes, and there they were, toasting her as if she'd laid the foundation herself with her bare hands and a prayer. I stepped inside. No one turned. No one asked how I was. One woman brushed past me to grab a napkin and muttered, "Excuse me," like I was a piece of misplaced furniture. I didn't speak, just walked the hallway toward what used to be my bedroom. On the way, I paused at the wall. It used to be a collection of mismatched frames, vacation photos, family dinners, holiday snapshots. Now it was curated, uniform, sterile, every picture perfectly aligned, perfectly staged, and not one of me. The 4th of July photo, where I held Leora's youngest, replaced with a solo shot of her and the baby. The Thanksgiving table shot where I carved the turkey, gone. In its place, Leora pouring cider beside our mother, both smiling like nothing had ever been broken. In the bathroom, I found another, a printed quote beneath a framed image of Leora in front of the fireplace. The soul of this family. I didn't cry. Instead, I went into the bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled down the quilt. I found the file box and thumbed through until I saw the envelope marked mortgage records. The corner was dog-eared, but it was still intact, still mine. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the mirror above the dresser. I didn't look upset, just done. In the kitchen, I spotted a notepad beside the fridge and a pen that said, "Leora for local counsel," on the side. Of course. I tore off a sheet and wrote in small, steady letters. This was never yours. I didn't sign it. I didn't need to. I left it next to the fruit bowl. On my way out, I passed 2 women by the door. One of them said, "She should be grateful, honestly. Leora's done so much for her." They didn't realize I was close enough to hear. I didn't flinch, didn't stop. By the time I reached my car, the only thing I felt was the weight of the envelope in my tote, and the quiet certainty that something had shifted. Not in them, in me. They could crop me out of every photo they liked, but I remembered every frame I used to be in. The next morning, I woke before the sun. I hadn't set an alarm, hadn't meant to rise so early, but my mind was already working before my feet hit the floor. The envelope from the party sat on the kitchen table where I'd left it the night before. I didn't touch it right away. I poured coffee, stared out the window while it brewed, and tried to convince myself that today would be just another day. It wasn't. At 10 a.m., I met Deidre at the attorney's office downtown. She had called me 2 days earlier, hesitating before saying, "I think you should see something, and I didn't want to tell you over the phone." The office was cold and clinical, with art prints of abstract landscapes and a receptionist who smiled too brightly. Deidre was already seated, flipping through her phone nervously, and stood as soon as she saw me. "I'm sorry," she whispered as we sat down together. "I thought you knew." The attorney, a middle-aged woman with a tight bun and calm demeanor, greeted us and laid out the paperwork like it was a routine update. "This is the latest version of your mother's estate planning," she said, sliding the packet forward. "We received instructions and notarized signatures 3 months ago." I didn't need to read the entire document. My eyes scanned directly for what mattered. My name. It wasn't there. Not in the list of beneficiaries. Not in the handwritten notes at the end. Not even a mention in the "in case of dispute" clause. But Leora's name? It was in bold, twice. "Is there a mistake?" I asked, though my voice sounded flat, like I already knew the answer. The attorney blinked slowly. "I'm afraid not. According to the documentation, your mother was of sound mind and expressed clear intent to revise her previous will. You were listed in the prior draft. This version supersedes it." Deidre leaned in, eyes wet. "Leora was at Mom's almost every day that week. I didn't think anything of it, but now, I don't know." I stared at the paper again. My name had once been written there, maybe just as ink, but it had meant something. And now it had been erased, not forgotten, not overlooked, but purposefully removed. I stood before the attorney could finish her next sentence. "Thank you," I said tightly. "I've heard enough." Deidre followed me to the parking lot, silent until I reached my car. Ardell, if you need anything, if you want to contest, I don't want anything, I cut in. Not from her, not from any of them. That wasn't completely true. I wanted the truth. I wanted the lie exposed. I wanted the record corrected, even if it didn't change the outcome. Back home, I set the legal folder down and stared at the ceiling. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just legal paperwork. It was a rewriting of my life, again, without my consent. Around 4 p.m., my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. Hello? A pause, then a low voice I hadn't heard in years. Ardell, it's Jonas. I stood up too fast, knocking my glass off the table. It hit the floor but didn't break. Jonas, my college boyfriend, the one that got away. Or rather, the one I let go because I thought he had walked away. I know this is unexpected, he continued, but I need to tell you something I should have said a long time ago. I didn't speak. My silence was permission. Your sister called me senior year, said you were cheating, that you'd had a breakdown and were unstable. I didn't believe her at first. But then, your mom called. She said it would be best for you if I let things go. I sat down. He sighed through the phone. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you by staying away, but I never stopped wondering. My voice came back in pieces. Why now? I saw your name in the news, something about that community award you won last year. It made me wonder if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. I laughed once, dry. You didn't make the mistake. You just believed the people who said they loved me. There was a beat of silence. Then, I'm sorry, for all of it. We didn't talk much longer. I hung up and sat in the dim light, the phone still in my hand. That night, I couldn't sleep. At dawn, I walked to the local FedEx print center. The clerk looked half asleep, but I was wide awake. I need to make copies, I said, sliding the mortgage records, bank statements, and will revision request across the counter. When I got home, I placed them in a new folder labeled Truth. Then I opened my journal and wrote, They didn't just steal from me. They built their version of the world on top of mine and told everyone else I was the one lying. But I remember the floor plan. I know which walls are fake. I met my new attorney the next day, requested a full audit, asked her to look into the signature date on the revised will, provided the name of the notary I knew hadn't even been in town that week. Then I asked her to update the property deed, removing my mother's temporary claim and transferring it fully under my control. She nodded. We can begin the process immediately. Before I left her office, I added one more sentence to my journal. This isn't about money. It's about the lie they all agreed to live with. By Sunday morning, the air felt heavier than usual. Not with weather. Columbus was mild that time of year, but with anticipation. The kind that settles over your shoulders when you know the hammer's about to fall. I'd spent the morning cleaning, not out of routine, but restlessness. There was a strange calm that comes from knowing the truth is no longer a secret, and that it now has teeth. I'd just returned from the grocery store, one hand balancing 2 paper bags while the other fumbled for my keys. As I turned the corner onto my block, I heard her before I saw her. You think you can cut me out like I'm nobody? Leora, in broad daylight, on my stoop, voice shrill enough to make 2 neighbors shift their blinds and someone across the street freeze mid-sprinkler adjustment. I didn't flinch. I didn't speed up or slow down. I walked straight past her toward the entrance, bags crinkling with every step. You really think this little power play is gonna stick? She barked. You're just mad that for once I'm the one getting credit. I paused at the front door just long enough to meet her eyes. You did that yourself. The door buzzed open from a tenant who lived upstairs, Mrs. Watkins, sweet but deaf in one ear. She didn't realize she'd just let in a storm. Leora pushed past me before I could stop her, stomping into the hallway like she belonged there. I didn't bother calling her back. Instead, I set the bags down and locked the main door behind us. Let's not do this here, I said lowly. People have lives. Yeah? And what about mine? She shouted. You just blindsided me, Ardell. Lawyers? Documents? You're sick. I didn't respond. I walked ahead of her, letting her noise trail behind. It wasn't until we reached my apartment door that her tantrum took an unexpected turn. On the entry table inside my unit sat a small jewelry box, one I hadn't opened in years. I'd found it tucked into an old dresser drawer while looking for tax records the night before. I hadn't even realized what was inside until I opened it again this morning. Now, Leora spotted it instantly. She lunged forward, ripping the box open, her eyes locking onto the bracelet nestled inside. A thin gold band engraved with AM, initials for Ardell Monroe, a gift from our father on my 21st birthday. His last gift, actually. Leora's face drained. "You still have that?" she asked, breath short. "You thought I didn't?" I answered. Her eyes narrowed. "It wasn't even yours anymore. You never wore it." "You gave it to your boyfriend," I said evenly. "You told him it was yours. You let him wear it like a badge while I spent a year wondering if I'd misplaced it. I needed a gift. It's not like it meant anything to you." There it was. The sentence that somehow cheapened everything and yet clarified even more. "It did," I said, "but apparently, so did I, just not to the people I thought mattered." She tried to grab the box. I moved it behind me and walked to the kitchen counter. "This isn't about jewelry," I said. "It's about boundaries, and you burned through every one of mine." I reached into the drawer and pulled out the folder I'd labeled legal. It wasn't thick, but every page inside carried the weight of years I could never get back. I handed it to her. "What's this?" she hissed. "Read." She opened it, her eyes darting over photocopied bank statements, loan applications, debt recovery notices, all with her signature beside my printed name. "This is fake." "It's filed," I replied. "You can scream all you want, but the notary, the bank logs, the timestamps, they all say otherwise." She slapped the folder shut. "You really think this is going to fix your pathetic life?" "No," I said, reaching to take it back. "But it's going to stop you from wrecking mine." Leora grabbed one of the pages and tried to tear it. Her hands shook. "Go ahead," I said. "Rip it all. It won't matter. The court already has copies. This is just for you." She froze. Then, in a final, desperate act of denial, she threw the folder across the room. Papers fluttered like wounded birds, some landing near the couch, others under the coffee table. I didn't move to pick them up. I just stared. And slowly, I walked to the door, opened it wide. "Leave." She stood there, chest heaving, unsure whether to explode or cry. I said, "Leave, Leora. This is over." She turned without another word. No threat, no apology, no final insult. Just the sound of heels on tile, the brief slam of the outer door, and then silence. I closed my own door. No slamming, no theatrics, just a soft click. In the silence that followed, I knelt and gathered the scattered papers. Each one felt less like a weapon and more like a shield now. By the time the last page was back in the folder, my hands were steady. This wasn't a victory. It was a restoration. The folder sat on my table for 3 days before I did anything with it. I didn't touch it. I didn't open it. I just looked at it sometimes, like it might whisper something back to me. But on the morning of Mom's birthday, I wrapped it. Not in newspaper or packing tape. I took my time. Black satin paper pressed smooth at the seams, a silver ribbon, no card, no note on the outside. Inside the box, I placed 2 things, a silver photo frame, empty, and the court filings that outlined every debt, every forged signature, every lie that wore my name like a borrowed coat. I added a single sheet of paper, folded once. On it, I had written, "I'm not the daughter you wanted at the table, but I won't fund the lies anymore." Then I called a courier service. Paid extra for express delivery to the restaurant where the family dinner would be held. I didn't even ask who RSVP'd. I didn't need to know. By the time the package arrived, I was back at my apartment, sitting on the couch, staring out the window. I imagined the moment the box was opened, Velma gasping, Leora going pale, maybe Aunt Faye putting a dramatic hand to her chest. I didn't expect a call, but my phone lit up anyway. Cousin Rachel first. "What the hell, Ardell?" I ignored it. Then Uncle Dennis. "This could have been handled better." No reply. Finally, my mother. 1-line text. "Why humiliate her like this?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back, Because I was humiliated in silence for years and no one asked why. I didn't wait for a response. I powered the phone down and placed it in the drawer next to my old checkbooks and expired coupons. That night, my attorney called. She confirmed Leora hadn't shown up to the initial hearing. No statement, no representative, just an absence. She's hoping this all goes away, the attorney said. It won't. I know, I told her. That night, I didn't sleep much. I got out of bed just after 2 a.m. and brewed coffee I didn't drink. Around 4, I got dressed, packed a small tote with a notebook, pen, and the court calendar printout, and I drove. I didn't go to work. I didn't go to the courthouse. I went to my parents' house, now mostly empty, save for old furniture and dust-covered heirlooms. I parked in the driveway and walked through the back, using the same key I'd had since I was 17. Inside, it was silent. Not cold exactly, but abandoned in a way that didn't feel recent. In the den, my father's old recliner sat just where it always had, angled toward the TV, faded from sunlight. I sat down in it slowly, the leather creaking beneath me like a whisper from the past. I hadn't sat in that chair since before he died. It wasn't sacred, just avoided. Like if I sat in it too long, I'd hear him ask why I was always so sensitive. But this time, I wasn't trying to be anything. Not soft, not quiet, not agreeable. I opened my tote and pulled out the court date notice. Then I lit a small candle I'd brought from home. Vanilla, my father's favorite scent, not that he ever said it. I just remembered the way he lingered in the kitchen whenever Mom baked with it. I stared at the flame and whispered, more to the room than to anyone specific. I didn't break this family. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken. No one answered. No thunder cracked outside. No ghostly breeze passed through the vents. Just silence. I stayed there a while longer, watching the flame dance, letting memory and hurt and a strange sort of peace mix in the stillness. When the candle burned down to a stub, I blew it out, packed up my things, took one last glance at the recliner, and left. As I stood at the front door, hand on the knob, I felt the full weight of what I'd done, not out of guilt, but release. I didn't slam the door behind me. I didn't even close it hard. I just let it fall shut with a click. Final, simple, soft. The door closed behind me with a soft sigh, and I stood still for a moment, keys in hand, jacket still buttoned. It was quiet in a way that felt earned. I drove back without turning on the radio. Not out of sadness, but because silence finally sounded like mine. 2 weeks later, I was knee-deep in cardboard boxes and bubble wrap. The Portland air smelled like wet bark and old books, and the apartment above the bookstore creaked every time I moved. But I liked that. It reminded me I was somewhere new, somewhere honest. I'd taken the smallest unit, a studio with a single window that overlooked the alley, a kitchenette that hummed louder than necessary, and a floor heater that clicked like it was thinking. And yet, it felt more like home than the 5-bedroom house I used to walk on eggshells in. I spent a slow Tuesday afternoon organizing my desk drawers when I found it. An old accordion folder labeled Archived Statements. Most of it was mundane: bank letters, expired IDs, a faded library card from college. But one envelope made me pause. It wasn't marked, just a random printout from an old online account. I unfolded the paper and squinted at the line item. A luxury spa resort 2 towns over. Weekend package, champagne, 2 massages, private suite. Billed directly to my card. I remembered that weekend. I'd been out of state, attending a work conference. Leora had told me she couldn't afford gas money that month. She'd texted me some sob story about Mom's prescriptions and how things are tight right now. I set the paper on the table, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. It wasn't the charge itself that hit me. It was how easily she'd pulled it off. How natural it must have felt. This wasn't new, I said out loud. This was just older than I realized. There was no rising anger, no sudden urge to confront her, just a deep, hollow exhale, like letting out air I'd been holding for too many years. Love, when it's tangled in guilt, makes a lot of excuses. And I'd made every single one of them. I folded the paper, slipped it into a file marked closed, and kept packing. Later that evening, I placed the last few items on the shelf by my small window. A framed copy of my new business license. Second shelf, home organizing solutions. A printed quote from Maya Angelou, and the photo of my father's old chair, now long gone. Next to that, I placed the empty silver frame, the same one I sent on Mom's birthday. I didn't plan to fill it. Some spaces were better left blank. Around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed on the counter. It was her again, Velma. No message, just a missed call. This was the 5th one in as many days. I didn't pick up. A few minutes later, I opened the letter I'd received earlier in the mail. A formal response from Leora's attorney. Pages of deflection, positioning, justification. No apology, not even the pretense of remorse. I read the entire thing, then carefully folded it and slid it into a folder I'd labeled not evidence or legal, but simply past. I stood up and walked onto the tiny balcony that overlooked the alley and the back door of the bookstore below. The Oregon rain had started to fall, gentle, misty, not in a hurry. I pulled my cardigan tighter around me and sat in the metal chair I'd dragged out there. Peace doesn't always come with trumpets or a grand declaration. Sometimes it's just an unanswered call you no longer feel guilty about. A letter you read without shaking. A memory that stings but doesn't wound. I reached for my journal and wrote one final line. I didn't win. I walked away. And that was everything. I used to think peace came from fixing everything. Patching wounds, mending bonds, making sure everyone else was okay. But real peace? It came when I stopped apologizing for protecting myself. When I stopped watering relationships that only drained me. This story wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming the space I was told I didn't deserve to stand in. About learning that love doesn't mean allowing harm, and silence isn't the same as grace. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom with a backbone. If any part of my journey made you pause, reflect, or feel seen, I'd love to know. What does family loyalty mean to you? Have you ever been made to feel invisible in your own story? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story touched something deep inside you. Or just tell me, where are you watching from? And hey, if you didn't connect with this story, that's okay too. I'd still love to hear why. Let's talk about it in the comments. If you believe in the power of truth, healing, and stories that hit close to home, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Because sometimes, the stories that break us open are the ones that put us back together.
Hi, my name's Lacey. They told everyone I was too busy to be invited. Said I wouldn't care. But while I was presenting at a conference, they were using my house, hosting a family reunion without me. They turned my bedroom into a nursery, forged my signature, lined up a buyer, and smiled like nothing was wrong. How do you fight back when the people stealing from you call it love? Do you stay quiet? Or do you take everything back, one legal page at a time? I pulled my suitcase up the driveway, hearing the gravel crunch under the wheels louder than usual. Maybe it was the silence I expected that made the noise seem sharper. Too sharp. My head was still full of the last conference session in Dallas, and I hadn't even unpacked the protein bars in my bag. I just wanted my bed. Familiar quiet. A long, hot shower with water pressure that didn't feel like it was rationed. But instead of silence, there was a low thrum. Laughter, music, the unmistakable sound of children darting barefoot across a wooden deck. I frowned. At first, I thought it might be the neighbors. A graduation party, maybe. Or a block potluck. But as I turned the corner and came up the front steps, I saw it. A massive white banner stretched across my own porch, tied tight to the columns I paid for, read, "Family means forever. Carter Reunion 2025. I stopped cold. My hand gripped the suitcase handle like it was an anchor. The door was wide open. I could see balloons drifting around the foyer. The kitchen window glowed with warm light, my light. The scent of pulled pork and sugary coleslaw spilled out like a joke. I heard someone inside shout, "Make sure Donna gets the first plate." My mother's name. I stepped inside. No one turned. No one noticed. Not even my dog, who wasn't here. Because I didn't bring him this trip, knowing I'd only be home for 48 hours. It was easier to imagine I'd made a mistake, that maybe I'd walked into the wrong house. Except the framed photo on the wall, me, age 6, holding a lopsided birthday cake, confirmed this wasn't a stranger's home. It was mine. I slipped off my shoes, out of habit, and moved past the laughter, past a group of cousins I hadn't seen since my father's funeral, and made my way upstairs. The second-floor suite I designed, paid for, and lived in when I wasn't traveling was at the end of the hall. I reached into my bag for the key. It didn't fit. The door wasn't locked. I pushed it open. My breath caught. My bed had been made, with someone else's linens. There was a diaper bag in the corner, a breast pump plugged in near the closet, and a pair of floral wedges lying carelessly across my armchair. I walked slowly to the bathroom. My toothbrush was gone. My shampoo was replaced with baby-safe soap and a lavender-scented candle I would never buy. A pink loofah hung where my father's razor used to be. A child's plastic duck floated in the sink, half filled with murky water. My hand brushed the edge of the mirror as I reached for a towel, but the one hanging wasn't mine. It was monogrammed with Stephanie's initials, my brother's wife. I turned back into the room. On the nightstand was a half-eaten granola bar, a crumpled paper towel, and a toy that chirped when I accidentally nudged it. I looked to the bookshelf. My books had been stacked and moved to a single crate labeled upstairs storage, and where my framed research certificate used to stand, there was now a Carter family photo from someone's beach trip. I wasn't in it. No one had even tried to make it look like I still lived here. I went back downstairs. Still, no one noticed. Aunt Carol was hugging someone who looked vaguely familiar. Cousin Jamie lifted his glass and gave a toast to the ones who built this home, nodding at Travis and Donna like I didn't exist. I stood in the hallway, half in shadow, half in the light from the dining room, and watched a slideshow flicker across the living room TV. Photos from years ago, and some from recent months. Birthday cakes, baby showers, 4th of July barbecues. All in this house. My house. My face was in 2 photos. Both from childhood. Nothing after 2005. I could feel the heat building in my chest. Not anger, not grief. Just heat. Like something old was burning from the inside. I turned, walked toward the foyer. My suitcase was still where I left it. The wheels tilted slightly, like even it didn't want to stay. As I reached for the handle, I whispered it. Quiet. Just for me. I'm not supposed to be here. I looked back. No one noticed. Then I opened the door and stepped out into the dusk. Then, why did they make sure I was gone before they came? I didn't go far. Just circled the block, walking slow, trying to find a version of this that made sense. Maybe someone else planned the reunion. Maybe it wasn't supposed to be in my house. Maybe it started as something smaller and spiraled. That's how they'd explain it, I was sure. The kind of lie that doesn't sound like a lie until it's repeated too many times. By the time I stepped back inside, the light had shifted. The evening sun angled through the front windows, casting long, warm strips across the floor. Most of the guests had migrated into the living room. The noise was softer now, no more kids screaming, just the low hum of conversation and a faint playlist of 80s throwbacks that probably hadn't changed since the last family barbecue. I stood just behind the edge of the archway, half in the dining room, half in the hallway, watching the slideshow flicker on the big TV. The opening slide read, The Carter Legacy. A baby picture of Travis came up first, then another of him in his high school jersey. Graduation, his wedding, baby shower, more of Travis. I kept watching. The screen showed Donna blowing out candles at her 50th. My father, just once, sitting next to Travis, arms slung proudly over his shoulder. There were group photos from events held in this house. My house. I remembered each one because I'd been out of town for most of them, working conferences, speaking at panels, doing what they always said was too much, or not really family-friendly. Then came a slide with the title, The Next Generation. There was my nephew and Travis's godson, 2 kids I barely knew. Then, nothing. There was no photo of my white coat ceremony, no snapshots from med school, nothing from the day I got this place, handed my mom a set of keys, told her she'd never have to worry about rent again. They'd erased me, not out of spite, I was starting to understand, but out of narrative. I didn't fit the version of family they wanted to showcase. I stepped back, moved toward the kitchen. My mother was near the fridge, laughing about something with Travis and two of our cousins. She turned and caught sight of me. Her smile faltered for half a second. "You're home," she said, like I was the unexpected guest. "I thought you'd be back tomorrow," she added quickly. "Didn't Travis tell you?" Travis, cool as ever, picked up a tray of lemon bars. "I said Friday or Saturday, I think." "You said the house would be quiet," I said flatly. Donna's voice turned soft. Performed. "Sweetheart, this wasn't about excluding you. We just assumed you'd be working." "That's your go-to, isn't it?" I replied. "Assuming." Travis raised a brow, still smiling. "Look, it's just a gathering. It sort of grew. It wasn't this big at first. We didn't want to bother you." "No," I said. "You didn't want me involved." I pulled out my phone. No missed calls, no emails. I opened the family group text, or rather, a group text. There was another group chat listed. Carter Core. My number wasn't there. I didn't say anything else. I didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me react. Instead, I walked down the hallway toward the guest bathroom. I needed a quiet place to think. I closed the door behind me, leaned against the sink, and let the silence wrap around me. I opened the email app, searched Carter Reunion. Nothing. Then I thought about the banner outside. That thing wasn't homemade. It was printed, laminated, the kind of thing you custom order from a shop. That takes planning. That takes intent. They hadn't forgotten me. They'd excluded me from the start. I stepped out of the bathroom and made my way slowly through the house. I paused in front of the fridge, scanning the taped-up list of guests and assigned sleeping areas. My name wasn't on it. I took a picture. Then I walked back to the living room and snapped a photo of the banner. One more of the slideshow. I didn't know what I would do with them yet, but I knew better than to rely on memory alone. Paper trails matter. I caught sight of Travis raising his glass again. Another toast. "To family," he said loudly. "The ones who show up." People cheered. Donna laughed. Stephanie raised her cup. My name wasn't in the speech. Not even a glance in my direction. I turned back into the hallway, opened my messages, and tapped out a text to someone who would tell me the truth. "When did they first tell you about this reunion?" I sent it. Waited. No answer. Then I typed again. Because something tells me I wasn't just an oversight. Because apparently my name was the first thing they took off the list. I didn't get a response to that text, not right away. So I stepped outside, trying to breathe through the weight in my chest. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was the awareness of being rewritten. There's something uniquely cruel about being forgotten on purpose. The side yard was quieter. Most people were either watching the slideshow or hovering around the dessert table. I stood near the drink station, rubbing the condensation off a cup of sweet tea someone had left behind. The ice had melted completely. That's when a man I didn't recognize, probably married to one of my cousins, waved at me from across the folding table. He smiled politely and said, "Hey, could you refill the napkin holders when you get a sec?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" He tilted his head, still smiling. "You're one of the caterers, right?" My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Not yet. He didn't seem to notice the pause, just pointed toward the serving trays. "They're running low." I didn't move. He gave me an awkward half laugh, shrugged, and walked off. I looked down at what I was wearing. Black slacks, a clean blouse, flats. Functional, not festive. I was dressed like someone who'd arrived from a conference, which I had, not like someone who was part of this celebration. From behind me, a woman chuckled and said, "Oh, that's Travis's sister. She works a lot, I think." Another voice replied, "Right. The one who lives in Boston or somewhere?" Austin. I live in Austin, in this house. I turned and walked back inside, slipping through the crowd like a ghost who used to live here. The living room was darkened now, curtains drawn for the projector. I leaned against the far wall as the slideshow continued, the room full of quiet laughter and nods of recognition. There was Travis again, in his college football uniform, him with his son, Stephanie kissing his cheek, photos of Donna holding a grandchild, beach trips, birthdays, milestones. "And here's the family through the years," the voiceover said. Travis's voice, of course. A few old pictures of me flashed by. Toddler, then a preteen holding a plastic trophy. That was it. Nothing from my medical school graduation. No photos from the charity gala where I'd spoken as keynote last fall. Nothing from the day I handed this house's keys to my mother with a smile I had to force through the tremble of my father's absence. Then, a photo I did recognize. The day I moved in. I remember standing next to the porch rail, holding a plate of lemon bars Donna had baked as a housewarming gesture. Except in the slideshow image, I was cropped out. All that remained was Travis, mid-laugh, as if it were always his moment. From the couch, a teen cousin whispered, "Didn't she leave for, years?" "Yeah," another muttered. "She wasn't really around." I turned away before I could hear more. Upstairs, I slipped into the guest bathroom and locked the door behind me. My hands gripped the edge of the sink. I stared at myself in the mirror. Not teary, just tired, like someone watching themselves shrink from the inside out. I didn't cry. Instead, I pulled my phone from my purse and opened the messaging app. I clicked into the family group thread. Then I opened the other thread. The new one, the one I wasn't part of. The one where everything had been planned. I went back to the last birthday text I sent Donna, 3 months ago. "Happy birthday, Mom. Call me later." She hadn't responded. Just a thumbs-up emoji a day later. No words. I scrolled further. The pattern was clear. I had become a side note. Not even background support. Just logistical furniture. The one who funded the house. The one who stayed away. The one they could cut out cleanly, as long as they did it slowly enough. I opened WhatsApp. The Carter Core group didn't have my name on it. I clicked Leave Group without hesitating. Maybe they didn't erase me. Maybe they just replaced me with a version of me that never asked to be remembered. I tapped Velma's contact. "Are you here?" I sent. No reply. I typed again. "If you are, I need 5 minutes. Just you and me. Because I need to ask the only person in this family who might actually tell me the truth." I waited near the back patio, where the light had started to shift into that muted orange that only shows up at the end of summer. A few of the older cousins were gathered near the garden, playing cornhole and arguing over whether the brats were cooked through. I stayed near the edge of the shadow, barely visible, until I caught Velma's eye. She knew. The way her expression changed the moment she saw me, she knew. I motioned with 2 fingers, nothing dramatic, just enough. She didn't say a word to the others, just set down her cup and followed me quietly along the back of the house, out of view from the sliding glass doors. We sat on the edge of the porch steps, facing the fence line. I waited a moment before speaking. "Tell me something I don't want to hear." Velma exhaled slowly. "They planned this back in April." I didn't flinch. She went on, steady. "Your name was never on the invite list. Donna told me not to bring it up. Travis said you wouldn't care." I stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Velma reached into her handbag and handed me a folded printout. The paper was creased and smelled faintly of cinnamon gum. I opened it. A spreadsheet. Names, RSVP dates, room assignments. Everyone. Even cousins I hadn't seen in 10 years. Except me. "You're not crazy, baby," she said softly. "They wrote you out." I nodded once and folded the paper, slipped it into my pocket. The backyard laughter kept drifting toward us, soft and full of inside jokes I hadn't been invited to be part of for years. But this was different. This wasn't neglect. This was strategy. Later that night, after the last tray of food had been covered and the music switched to low country ballads, I moved upstairs. There's a cabinet at the end of the hall, a holdover from when my father insisted on family-accessible documents. Donna had claimed it after he passed, labeled it household files. It wasn't locked. I slid the top drawer open. Bank statements, maintenance invoices. I kept flipping until I saw a thick folder labeled Deed plus Ownership. I opened it. The first page was a copy of the original co-ownership agreement. My name was there, in the place where it should be. The second page was a printed draft, heavily edited. There was a signature in my name, but the ink didn't match. Neither did the handwriting. It looked like someone had tried to trace it, then gone over it twice to make it stick. 2 sticky notes clung to the corner. Ask Notary Monday. Include transfer clause for seamless title change. I stared at them for a while. It was like reading your own obituary and realizing it had been scheduled in advance. I took photos. Every page. Then carefully slid everything back into place, exactly how I'd found it. As I walked back toward my room, I passed the kitchen and paused. The light was still on. Voices, low, familiar. I moved closer, keeping my steps quiet on the hardwood. Travis. Once it's transferred, she won't be able to block anything. Legally, we'll have control. She's never here anyway. Donna. I just want it settled before the baby comes. I can't deal with more stress. Travis again. She thinks she's the martyr, but she doesn't even show up for Easter. And I'm sorry, but this house means something to us. Donna made a clinking sound, probably tapping her glass against his. It should go to someone who values it. I didn't move, just turned and walked away. In my room, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out my own file. The one with the deed. The one signed with a real pen, by a real notary, in a real bank office I paid for. I laid it side by side with the doctored one on my desk. Then, I pulled out a fresh legal pad. Across the top, in black ink, I wrote, Fraud. Intent to transfer property without consent. I underlined it twice. Then, slowly, I added, Forged signature, no written consent. Financial misrepresentation, verbal confirmation. Kitchen, 9:40 p.m., Donna and Travis. I set down the pen and stared at the list. There was no need to shout, no need to confront them with rage. If they wanted to turn this into a power move, they were going to learn what it was like to face someone who doesn't need to scream to win. They thought I was the quiet one. They were about to meet the version of me they worked so hard to erase. I tucked the tampered copy into a folder, sealed it, and slid it into my briefcase. Then I put the original deed back into my drawer and locked it. Back on the legal pad, I scribbled one more sentence across the bottom. If they want a war over this house, they're going to get a legally binding one. They think I'm here for the potato salad, but I'm here to take inventory of what they've already stolen. It was almost 10 o'clock when I made my way to the stairwell. The party had thinned out, but the people who mattered, at least to the plan, were still hanging around. I found a quiet spot halfway up the stairs, where the second-floor landing overlooked the living room but stayed out of everyone's line of sight. The floor creaked under me slightly when I sat down, but no one looked up. I pulled the legal pad back onto my lap and continued the list, cataloging every red flag I'd ignored for years. That's when Velma came around the corner. She had a small styrofoam cup in her hand, probably tea, maybe coffee if someone had bothered to brew it fresh. Her eyes scanned me first, then the pad in my lap, and she gave a knowing nod. I heard your name wasn't even included on the original group email chain, she said, lowering herself slowly onto the step beside me. I didn't respond right away, just kept the pen hovering, mid-thought. She sipped whatever was in the cup and looked toward the voices drifting up from below. They chose this weekend because you'd be out of town, she continued. Travis said you'd just make things complicated. Complicated, I repeated, mostly to myself. I asked about you, she added, her voice quieter now. Donna said you were busy. Travis said you'd thank them for not dragging you into the hassle. I exhaled, not sharply, but like I'd been holding something stale in my lungs too long. They didn't just forget me, I said. They planned around me. Strategically. Velma placed the cup beside her on the step. You always were the one who held it all together, but when people get too comfortable, they forget who paid for the glue. She left not long after. I stayed where I was, thinking about that glue, about how much I'd invested just so they could pretend it had always been theirs. About an hour later, once dessert had been served and cleared, Donna tapped her glass with a fork. Let's do a little family check-in before everyone heads out, she called. I paused at the top of the stairs. Just something light, Travis added from the dining room, where people were beginning to shift their chairs. Talk through shared spaces and such, housekeeping stuff. By the time I walked in, the table was full. I was the last to sit. The tone started politely enough. Travis led with a joke about overwatering the front lawn, which Donna turned into a comment about the sprinklers needing better scheduling. Then things drifted. Since Lacey travels so much, Travis began, glancing at me, but not really looking. We were thinking it might make sense to revisit the structure. The structure? I asked, flat. Donna jumped in. Your brother and I were just thinking, maybe you'd be more comfortable selling your share. We could make sure the home stays functional. Functional, I echoed. Another label. Another box to be placed in, then shelved. You're gone more than you're here, Travis said. This way, you wouldn't have to worry about any of this. Aunt Rachel chimed in, lighthearted. Honestly, I thought she already signed off years ago. There were printouts on the table. Not the originals. I would have recognized them. But photocopies. One had my name highlighted in yellow, circled like a hazard zone on a map. No one made eye contact. I didn't raise my voice. Instead, I looked directly at Travis. You didn't think I'd be home tonight? He shifted, his mouth forming a half smile. You're always moving. We just figured. No, I cut him off. You counted on me not being here. I stood up. Slowly, not rushed. I gathered the papers closest to me and flipped them face down. Next time you want me to sign away my property, I said calmly, maybe don't leave a post-it note on my legal pad. The room stiffened. Donna's smile faltered. I walked out without waiting for anyone's response. When I reached my room, the door had been left ajar. My stomach clenched. I pushed it open and scanned the space. Nothing was out of place, except for one new detail. A small square post-it on the top of my legal pad. No pressure, but the sooner the better. I stared at it for a full 10 seconds, before picking it up, folding it in half, and dropping it into the trash. I didn't need that kind of handwriting in my life anymore. This wasn't a reunion. This wasn't even family maintenance. It was a handoff, coordinated like a business merger, disguised as nostalgia and guilt. They had gathered to transfer power, ownership, history, and they had planned it in my absence, assuming I wouldn't notice or care. Or worse, that I'd let them. Back at my desk, I opened the legal pad to a fresh page. In bold, at the top, I wrote, They think I'm here for the potato salad, but I'm here to take inventory of what they've already stolen. I closed the notepad, set it beside the folder, and leaned back in my chair. My phone buzzed on the desk beside me, lighting up with a notification from the family's shared calendar. It was labeled Brunch with Core, scheduled for Sunday morning. I wasn't invited. I didn't even blink. Instead, I left my suite and headed toward the guest rooms. I wasn't looking for confrontation, just space. Some air that didn't smell like deception masked in lemon-scented furniture polish. As I stepped into the hallway, I nearly collided with Kayla, my cousin's teenage daughter. She had something clutched in her hand, swinging it proudly. Hey, Aunt Lacey, she chirped, holding up a delicate gold chain with a small curved pendant. Look what Grandma gave me. She said it was hers from back in the day. I stopped in place. It wasn't Donna's necklace. It was mine. I bought that chain 6 years ago, the same week I made the final payment on the house. I gave it to Donna with a handwritten note that said, Thank you for believing in my dream. She'd smiled and said, This will always remind me that we built something together. And now, she had passed it off like a party favor. "That's nice," I said, my voice measured. "It suits you." Kayla smiled and skipped past me, humming something off-key. I turned and walked back to my room, shut the door gently, and sat at my desk again. I didn't slam drawers. I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry. I just took out my phone and opened my email. And there it was, like it had been waiting for me. Subject line: I didn't think it was real until today. It was from David, one of the few cousins I still halfway trusted. We'd gone to the same undergrad, stayed in touch here and there, nothing major. The message started simple. "I'm sorry, I should have said something sooner." Attached was a forwarded thread. A long one. The kind that builds over weeks, where people feel comfortable revealing who they really are, because they think the room is private. The first email was from Travis. Subject: Carter Weekend Agenda. In it, he outlined the tentative schedule for the reunion, including room assignments and catering notes. It was dated 3 months ago. Halfway down the thread, a reply from Travis stood out. "Lacey's too intense. She'll ruin the vibe. Let's just plan around her." Donna replied shortly after. "She's always been distant. She'll be fine. She's got her own life." The rest of the family had chimed in with emojis and short, agreeable comments. Not one person said anything in defense. No questions, no pushback. They didn't just leave me out. They painted me as difficult, unapproachable, a liability to the mood. I closed the email and sat still for a moment, staring at my reflection in the darkened screen. What bothered me most wasn't the exclusion. It was the quiet agreement, the convenience of it all. They'd chosen to make me the problem, so they wouldn't have to admit their own comfort with erasing me. I opened my laptop. Folders lined the desktop, some personal, some professional. But I clicked straight into the one labeled House. Inside were the deed scans, the email correspondence from the bank, tax records, zoning permits. I began dragging all of it into a new folder. I renamed it June Property Conflict, Legal Prep. Next, I opened the family Dropbox. I scrolled through the photos they'd uploaded from the reunion. Me? Not even once. I right-clicked the folder. Delete. A pop-up asked, "Are you sure you want to remove yourself from this shared folder?" Yes. Done. Then, just to be sure, I logged out completely. I wasn't part of that history. I wouldn't keep pretending to be. Before going to bed, I pulled up the voicemail app on my phone and hit record. "Hi, Barbara, it's Lacey. I'll need an hour of your time Monday morning. It's regarding misuse of shared property and what I believe qualifies as forgery intent." I saved it, labeled it Voicemail Legal Notice, and added it to the new folder. Then I stood, walked over to the door, and locked it. For the first time in a long while, I smiled. Not because I felt triumphant, not because anything had been fixed, but because I finally understood where I stood. I wasn't here to ask for understanding. I was here to set the record straight. "Please stay after the party clears out. I need a witness." Velma's reply came 2 minutes later. "I'll be there." I slipped my phone into the side pocket of my slacks and moved quietly down the hall. The lights in the house were lower now. Someone had dimmed them to match the slow fade of the evening. Most of the guests were congregating around the dessert table or drifting toward the front door. The night had shifted into the soft, polite phase where people say long goodbyes they don't really mean. That's when I remembered the drawer. There's a pantry closet off the kitchen that Donna turned into a kind of household command center. Not quite an office, but close enough. The shelves were lined with printer paper, receipts, junk mail, and mismatched pens in a mason jar. On the small counter space, I spotted a neat stack of printed documents, right where I expected them to be. I pulled them closer, flipping through slowly. The first page made my chest tighten. It was a revised co-ownership agreement. My name was at the top, my signature at the bottom, except the pen stroke was off. My actual signature curves down in the R. This one arched slightly upward. They had tried to fake it. A sticky note had been pressed just above the line. Review final terms with notary before Monday. My stomach turned as I read the clause halfway through the next page. In the event the co-owner is absent for more than 90 days in a calendar year, full authority will default to the primary resident. They hadn't just guessed I wouldn't be home. They planned around me. I took a photo of the signature, then one of the clause, then the cover page. I slid them back exactly where I found them and walked back into the hallway. The conversation downstairs had gone faint, broken up by music and clinking silverware. On my way back to the stairs, I paused at the door to my old bedroom. It was cracked open. Inside, the room had been transformed. A banner reading Baby Coyle's Nursery hung above the bed frame. There were baby clothes neatly folded on top of the dresser, onesies, tiny socks, a blanket with embroidered initials. Balloons floated lazily near the ceiling. The scent of baby powder drifted through the air. Travis stood in the corner, giving a tour to one of our aunts. "Best natural light in the house," he was saying. "Figured this space made the most sense." I stepped inside. He didn't stop speaking. "You mean my room?" I asked flatly. He glanced over at me, then looked back at the aunt. "Come on, Lace. You hardly use it. You're barely here." I nodded once. "Right. Barely here. And that means it's open for grabs?" Another cousin poked her head in and added, "It's kind of poetic, isn't it? One chapter ends, another begins." I didn't respond, just walked over to the dresser and picked up a stuffed animal, something generic and plush. I haven't died," I said. Travis exhaled loudly. "Don't be dramatic. You live in airports now." I set the toy back down and walked out. Back in my suite, I shut the door, locked it, and leaned against the edge of the desk. My hands weren't shaking yet, but I could feel it creeping up. The kind of shake that doesn't come from nerves, but from clarity. Cold clarity. I opened my legal folder, spread the documents across the surface, and started writing a timeline. April. Initial group emails. No mention of me. May, new co-ownership draft printed. Signature faked June. Family check-in used to pressure sell-off tonight. Bedroom repurposed. Documents exposed. Intent confirmed. This was no longer a misunderstanding. This was coordination. Calculated transition of property disguised as a sentimental weekend. "This is no longer an emotional wound," I said under my breath, pen still moving. "It's a legal violation, and it ends tonight." I opened my laptop, composed a draft email. Subject: breach of co-ownership agreement. Immediate action required attached. Photos, copies, timestamps. I didn't hit send yet. Not until I had a second set of eyes on it. I grabbed my phone and texted Velma again. "Front porch, midnight." Then I opened my window to let the air in and sat in silence. I could still hear muffled music, the last chords of something old and familiar. Travis's voice echoed faintly from below, still laughing, still leading. But by this time tomorrow, none of them would be laughing. They'll get the email before dessert. I closed the laptop with a quiet click and stood still for a few seconds, letting the silence wrap around me. The room felt cleaner now. Not physically, but inside my chest. Like I'd finally cleared the air I'd been holding for years. The draft email had been sent. Velma had seen everything. I didn't need to rehearse it anymore. By the time I made it downstairs, the kitchen was already full of daylight and chatter. A stack of syrupy plates sat in the sink. Someone had opened the back door, letting in warm air that smelled like overripe fruit and sunscreen. I poured a glass of water and glanced at the digital clock on the microwave, 8:17 a.m., and then my phone buzzed again. I turned it over. A notification lit up across the screen. Stephanie had tagged me in a Facebook post. That stopped me. I tapped it open, still holding my glass. The first photo in the carousel was a group shot. Half the family, all smiles, standing on the front lawn under the banner. I wasn't in it. The second was a baby-themed table setup. The third was a wide shot of the main floor bedroom. My old room. The caption read, "Our home is finally complete. Baby Coyle's new nursery. Shear's family means forever." Below it, Donna had commented, So proud of you both. This house is truly yours now. I didn't speak, didn't blink. I just took the screenshot. Then another. Then archived the post, saved the entire thread, and backed it up. Every like, every comment, every digital fingerprint of what they believed to be true was now documented. I rinsed my glass and set it down in the sink. Later that morning, while most of the guests were chatting over coffee or dragging coolers toward their cars, I walked to the file drawer near the pantry. It was labeled Guest Stay Forms. Nothing important had ever come out of that drawer, but something in my gut said, check it. Halfway down, beneath a bundle of old allergy release forms and printed maps to nearby hotels, I found a manila folder clipped closed. I opened it slowly. Inside were 2 forms. The first was labeled Voluntary Transfer of Ownership, Coyle Residence. My name was printed at the top. A line waited for my signature. The second version had the same format, same header, same layout, but this one was dated 3 weeks ago, and it already had my signature on it. Sort of. Not mine exactly. Close enough to pass if no one looked too hard. The ink tone was off. A slight drag on the second D in Darnell. My actual signature was tighter, more compact. This one was too open, too practiced. Clipped to both pages was a post-it note in Travis's handwriting. L needs to sign by end of June to avoid penalty clause in refinancing. Another note beneath it. Houston buyer interested. See email. I sat down right there on the kitchen stool and read everything again. They weren't just celebrating family. They were lining up a buyer. I stood, folder in hand, and walked straight to the stairs. Back in my room, I placed the documents next to the others, reunifying all the pieces they thought I wouldn't notice. I opened my email, started fresh. Subject: Termination of informal co-residence. Property use access. No message body, no introduction. I attached photos of both forged documents, screenshots of Stephanie's Facebook post and Donna's comment, a PDF of the original co-ownership agreement, voice memo from Donna and Travis in the kitchen. I addressed it to Barbara Reynolds, attorney, Travis Coyle, Donna Coyle, Stephanie Coyle. I hit send, no delay, no second guessing. I sat back and waited. By midday, the house was buzzing again. This time, not from music or cornhole matches. There was tension now, clenched jaws, side glances. I passed Travis once in the hallway. He didn't say a word, just looked at me, his face pale, lips pressed into a thin line. Around 3:30 p.m., Velma found me sitting on the front steps. She handed me a bottle of water and lowered herself onto the brick edge beside me. "It's done, isn't it?" she asked softly. I nodded. "They'll get the email before dessert." Velma didn't respond. She just gave a small nod, like she'd been expecting this moment since Friday. Inside the house, Donna's voice rose behind the walls. Not shouting, but high, quick, brittle. Something about gall, something about embarrassment. I didn't move. Out on the lawn, a toddler shrieked with delight as he chased bubbles across the grass. The bubbles burst silently against the sunlight, one after another, leaving no trace. That felt about right. The email had landed. The house was quieter now, charged, but quieter. I could feel it in the way the floor didn't creak with the same carefree energy when someone walked past. The laughter had drained from the walls. No one said a word to me directly, but there was no need. Silence, when it comes like that, says everything. By morning, the kitchen had a strange tension. Travis and Donna sat at the table, each with a phone in hand, unread emails glowing like warning lights. I stepped in, poured myself a cup of black coffee, and leaned against the counter. Travis was the first to break. "You're serious?" I nodded once. "I was serious 6 years ago. You just weren't paying attention." Donna rubbed her temples like she had a migraine coming on. "We're family. You don't evict family, Lacey." I didn't raise my voice. "You're right. Family doesn't need to be evicted. But you didn't treat me like family. You treated me like a silent investor with no say and endless resources. I pulled the envelope from my back pocket and slid it across the table. Notice of restricted access, I said. Filed and notarized. Travis didn't touch it. Just looked at me with that wounded face he always used when things stopped going his way. This isn't right. It wasn't right the moment you forged my signature, I said calmly. It wasn't right when you handed my room to a baby that isn't even born yet. It wasn't right when you left me off the guest list of a party happening in my own home. Donna reached for the envelope with a shaky hand. You're doing this because of hurt feelings. You'll regret it. I finished my coffee and set the mug in the sink. Being alone is easier than being erased, and frankly, I've been practicing for this for years. An hour later, the moving truck pulled up. It was a warm Sunday. The sun was already high, and the asphalt radiated heat in waves. The movers were fast, polite, and efficient. I'd paid extra for that. I didn't want drama. I wanted boundaries. From the front porch, I watched as they packed up Travis and Donna's belongings. Box by box, crib parts, kitchen tools, photo albums. Donna had labeled everything with a blue marker the night before. I could tell by her handwriting on the side of the boxes. Travis stood with his arms folded across his chest, watching a mattress being wheeled down the driveway. Velma stood beside me, quiet as always. She hadn't said much since the night before, but I felt her presence like a wall between me and the ache that threatened to return. You didn't yell, she finally said. I gave her a small smile. That would have given them something to feel righteous about. Donna approached once, just once. Her voice was softer now, more desperate. You'll be alone, Lacey. This isn't what your father would have wanted. I stared at her. You're probably right. He would have expected you to do better. She didn't have a response to that. By late afternoon, they were gone. The house was quiet again. Not empty. Quiet. There's a difference. I walked through the rooms slowly. My bedroom was just that again. Mine. The guest room had been cleared out. No toys, no random shoes. The kitchen didn't smell like butter and sugar anymore. It smelled like fresh air. I took a mug from the cupboard, poured myself another cup of coffee, and settled on the windowsill in the hallway that overlooked the front yard. The sun was dipping low. Golden hour. The house always caught the light perfectly at this time. That had been one of the reasons I bought it. Not for them. For me. My laptop chimed on the side table. A message from Barbara, my attorney. Property control resecured. Title reaffirmed. Case closed. I opened another folder I'd been working on for months, quietly. Q3 Housing Grant. Women in Transition Program. I'd already submitted the preliminary paperwork to the city. This house, once hijacked by people who couldn't see past their own entitlement, was going to serve women like me. Women who had been cut out of stories they helped build. Women who needed space, quiet, and dignity. Maybe this house can finally be what I built it for. Later, I texted Velma. Breakfast Sunday? She replied almost instantly. Only if you make the coffee. I laughed. Real this time. Not out of victory, but balance. It didn't feel like an ending. Not a dramatic one, anyway. It felt like the kind of quiet that comes after a long rain. I set my phone down, slipped on my sandals, and stepped out to the backyard. The banner was gone. The one that used to hang across the porch. I didn't know who took it down or when, but I was glad. It never really belonged here. Family means forever. Maybe. But boundaries? Boundaries mean peace. I stood for a moment in the morning light. Not waiting, not hoping, just breathing. Hi, my name's Ilara. They used to call me invisible until the money showed up. Then suddenly, I was family again. But not to be loved, to be used. They rewrote my story, stole my name, forged my signature, then filed a lawsuit when I said no. I kept quiet for years. Until silence started costing me more than speaking ever could. Would you call that love or control? Let me tell you what really happened. I didn't expect much when I pulled into the gravel driveway that afternoon. The house looked exactly the same as it had 20 years ago. Same faded shutters, same crooked porch swing that always threatened to snap. It wasn't nostalgia that made me late. I just couldn't stomach the idea of being on time for a party where I was more of an afterthought than a guest. I stepped out of my car in a beige dress I knew wouldn't stand out. Subtle, neutral, forgettable. That was the point. A few cousins waved half-heartedly from the porch. One of them hugged me like she hadn't just posted a Facebook status last month that read, "Some people forget where they came from once they make it." I didn't forget. I just stopped pretending they ever saw me clearly. Inside, the celebration was already in full swing. White and gold balloons floated beneath the low ceiling. The buffet line wound through the kitchen, and someone had made a giant poster with "Happy 50th, Theta and Vernell," plastered in glitter letters above a slideshow of old family photos looping on the TV. I scanned the room quickly. I wasn't in any of those pictures. Not the childhood ones, not the birthday parties, not even the holidays from just a few years back. I paused in front of the screen. It felt intentional, like a quiet erasure with a smile. The kind that's hard to prove but impossible to ignore. "Hey, Elle," Maris said, sweeping past with a champagne flute in hand. "Glad you made it. We were just about to take the family photo." I nodded. "Where do you want me?" She laughed. "Actually, we're short on hands. Can you take it? You're good with tech, right?" I stood there holding the camera, watching them pose. Mom fixed her blouse. Dad tugged his tie. Jarrett made a joke that made everyone laugh, just as I clicked the button. The picture turned out nice, framed even. I saw it the next day when someone posted it online. Me, not included. Again. I didn't say anything. I just helped myself to a small plate of potato salad, made the rounds with polite hellos, and slipped out the back door while no one was looking. The air outside was heavy with heat. I walked past the barn and toward my car, heels crunching against the gravel. On the way out, I passed the guest book table. No one had asked me to sign it, so I didn't. Sliding into the driver's seat, I glanced down at my phone. No new messages. I opened the Notes app and typed, "They never saw me, but someday they'll want to." 7 years earlier, I'd stood in that same house, much less sure of myself, far more desperate to be seen. It was after dinner. I'd cleaned up while Maris scrolled on her phone, and Jarrett talked about his latest flip property. I waited until Dad stepped out to check the fuse box, then quietly asked, "Jarrett, could I borrow $5,000? He didn't even pause. "For what?" "I want to start something," I said. "Online real estate tech. I've been working on some tools, taking classes after work." He laughed. Actually laughed. Loud enough that Mom turned from the sink and raised an eyebrow. "You're not exactly a business type, Elle," he said. "Maybe just get a real job?" Mom didn't say anything, just rinsed another plate. Jarrett leaned back, shaking his head. "Look, I'm not gonna fund a pipe dream. It's not personal, just be realistic." That was the moment. I remember it more clearly than birthdays, graduations, even funerals. It wasn't the money I needed. It was the vote of confidence, and they couldn't give it. I drove home in silence that night, spent the next 3 months skipping lunch to teach myself back-end systems, took freelance gigs that barely paid, built a beta from scratch in a rented co-working space with no AC. Funny how the absence of belief can light the biggest fire under you. Back in the present, I turned on the ignition. The ranch disappeared behind me in the rearview. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just felt done. That night, back in my apartment, I opened that same note and reread the line I wrote earlier. Then added another. "I won't beg to be in the picture. I'll build a frame they can't touch." I didn't write anything more after that note. I just closed the screen, sat back in the quiet, and let the words settle like dust. A frame they can't touch. That wasn't anger speaking. It was resolve. A decision I didn't need to announce, only live by. 2 years passed. 2 years of rebuilding, my confidence, my savings, my place in the world. I signed my first real investor, moved into an office with heat and working outlets, and stopped flinching when someone asked what I did for a living. The name Montlo started to show up in articles and awards. Funny how people start answering your calls when they hear it. Then, one Thursday morning, I got an email from Maris. Subject: surprise. Body: Mom and I are throwing a little something. You've been working so hard. We wanted to celebrate you. Just come. No pressure. No pressure. That was her favorite phrase when she was pressuring the hardest. Still, something in me, it wasn't hope, not exactly, wanted to believe it might be different this time. So I said yes. I arrived at the community hall 5 minutes early. The parking lot was already full, and I had to park 2 blocks down. When I stepped inside, I froze. This wasn't a casual dinner. It was a production. White linen tablecloths, a hired photographer, balloons in company colors. My company's colors. A banner stretched across the stage. Congratulations, Alara, from your proud family. Proud? That word landed heavy in my stomach. Neighbors I hadn't spoken to since I was 19 waved at me like I was running for office. Someone from the mayor's office handed me a certificate. My aunt came over with a glass of punch and whispered, "You always had it in you. Your mama just didn't know how to show it." I smiled. I nodded. I said thank you. But inside, I was ice. Then came the toasts. Jarrett was first. Of course he was. If it weren't for that old laptop I gave her back in the day, who knows where she'd be? He laughed, and people clapped like that was charming. Maris followed, dabbing her eyes with a cocktail napkin. I always said Alara was destined for more. I told Mom she just needed the right push. The guests loved it. They nodded and smiled, thinking this was a family of cheerleaders, not bystanders. Not the same people who told me to get a real job while I ate instant noodles at midnight building code I didn't even know would work. I didn't say anything. I clinked my glass politely. But that silence wasn't weakness. It was restraint. Later, I stepped into the kitchen, mostly to breathe. Maris followed, heels clicking like punctuation marks behind me. She leaned on the counter, wine glass in hand. Wasn't that sweet? I think everyone really felt the love. I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She sipped her drink and added, too casually, I was thinking, maybe we should make it official. You know, Montlo and Vantrell Consulting. Sounds stronger together, don't you think? I turned to look at her. She smiled wider. For the brand, she said. Investors like to see family unity. And technically, I did help, right? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. You weren't there when it was risky, I said, meeting her gaze without flinching. You won't be there now that it's safe. Her face tightened, just for a second. Then she laughed. That airy, too loud kind of laugh she used when she didn't get her way. Oh, come on, Elle. Don't be like that. We're family. I nodded slowly. Exactly. I left before dessert. Driving home, the air in the car felt lighter than the room I'd left behind. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows over the streets, but I didn't feel tired. I rolled the windows down and let the wind tangle my hair. At a red light, I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. I recorded one line. Today was the first time I saw their strategy, and not their smiles. I pulled into their driveway on a Sunday, like I had 1,000 times growing up, but the gravel didn't crunch the same. It felt louder now, like it knew I didn't belong here anymore. Maris had texted earlier, said lunch was casual. Just us, she wrote. No reason, no pressure. I knew better. Their house still had that faint smell of lemon cleaner and fried oil, the same scent that clung to my hair every time I visited. The kitchen table was already set. Roast chicken, cornbread, green beans cooked too soft. My father, Vernell, sat at the head like a pastor about to deliver a sermon, while my mother hovered, refolding napkins that didn't need it. Look who finally found time for the little people, Jarrett said as he stepped out from the hallway, chewing something he didn't bother to swallow before talking. I let the comment slide. I'd learned long ago that confronting Jarrett too early in the visit just handed him control of the tone. Lunch was full of forced laughter. My parents traded old stories about when I used to build forts under the dining table, or the time I ran away at age 6 because I didn't want to eat liver. Their voices were light, but every word was too polished, rehearsed even, like they were laying out a trail of breadcrumbs to somewhere I hadn't agreed to go. Then, after my mother cleared the plates and returned with sweet tea, Dad leaned back, folded his arms, and said it. "We've been thinking," he began. "Maybe it's time we added the family's name back onto that land deed. You know, for legacy." My glass paused halfway to my lips. "That land's in my name," I said carefully. "It's been that way since I bought it." "We know," Theta said quickly, too quickly. "It's just, it would mean something. To your grandfather, to the family name." Maris chimed in, like she hadn't practiced this line in the mirror. "It's not about taking it from you, Alara. We're just trying to keep it in the bloodline." "That's why you gave it to me," I replied, setting my glass down. "Because you said I'd take care of it." Dad shrugged. "We didn't think you'd get this far." There it was. Clean, sharp, without apology. The truth sitting in the room like a cracked window on a freezing day. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't make a scene. I nodded once. "Thank you for lunch." Before anyone could respond, I stood, gathered my bag, and made my way to the porch. I didn't look back. Jarrett followed me out. I could hear the shift in his steps, quicker, purposeful. "Hold up," he called. "Just a second." I stopped halfway down the stairs, but didn't turn around. "I was out of line back then," he said. "You were right to do what you did. You proved us wrong." I turned slowly. He wasn't looking at me, just kicking at the dirt with his boot. "I've got this new project I'm starting. It's got real potential. Could use your name on the paperwork. Nothing major. Just for credibility. I'll run it. You just sign off." My heart didn't pound. My stomach didn't flip. I felt nothing. That's not how I do business. Jarrett smiled like he hadn't heard me. "Come on, Elle. We're family. You trust me, don't you?" "I take risks with ideas," I said, stepping past him. "Not people I had to survive from." I drove straight home without music, letting the silence fill the spaces his words had tried to wedge themselves into. I didn't rush, didn't slam the door when I walked into my apartment. I hung up my coat, toed off my shoes, and made a cup of chamomile tea. The kettle hissed softly, and for once, it didn't sound angry. I settled onto the couch, pulled out my laptop, and skimmed my inbox. Among the pitches and updates was a message from an old colleague, someone who'd known me before any of this. Subject: "Congrats. Would love to partner." I stared at it for a minute, then hit reply. "I appreciate the offer, but I've learned not to build futures with people who only showed up after mine started paying dividends." That night, I sat with my tea. The room dim, except for the glow of the desk lamp. I wasn't angry, not even disappointed. Just clear. If I hadn't succeeded, I would have still been the girl with the camera in the back. The one who was useful, never central. The one who didn't get to speak, only capture the moments for others. Not anymore. The next 8 weeks moved fast. Projects kept me buried. Deadlines, investor calls, onboarding new hires. I stayed busy on purpose. It was cleaner than dealing with the noise I knew was coming. But silence with my family is never permanent. It's just a commercial break before the next attempt. The invitation came through a forwarded email. A local charity was hosting a gala celebrating women entrepreneurs of the Heartland. My name was listed first under special honorees. Attached was a digital flyer. My face was on it. My bio. My company logo. All wrapped in a pink and gold banner that read, "Powered by the Vantrell Foundation." Maris. I stared at it for a full minute. I hadn't donated. I hadn't partnered. I hadn't even been informed. The gala was being held at the Tulsa Cultural Center, a spot that usually hosted traveling art exhibits or academic lectures. This time, it was draped in pastel linens, all smiles and champagne and polite applause. I arrived right before the main program began. No one greeted me at the door. A teenage volunteer handed me a name tag. and waved vaguely toward the crowd. At the far end of the room, I saw it. A large standing display, 10 feet tall, lit from below. It had a timeline of my career milestones printed in gold script. Above it, the heading, "Inspired by her sister's unwavering belief." I didn't need to guess who wrote that. The program began. Maris stepped on stage in a navy sheath dress, holding a wireless mic like she belonged there. "Watching my baby sister rise into a leader," she said with just enough tremble in her voice, "has been the honor of my life. This foundation, this room, this movement, it all started because I believed in her before the world did." Polite applause, smiling nods. I stayed seated, back row, stone still. Every time I blinked, I pictured all those late nights. No funding, no backup, no belief from anyone. She hadn't believed in me. She'd doubted me out loud, in front of others. Told me I was wasting my time. Now she was turning that silence into a stage. I didn't confront her that night, not publicly. That's what she wanted. That's what they all wanted. A reaction they could spin. So I waited. I clapped when the speeches ended. I posed for one photo when cornered by the event organizer. I left before dessert again. A week later, Bryony texted me, asking if I could come by for Aunt Lorna's birthday dinner. Said she missed me. Said, "Things are weird lately." I knew what she meant, but I went anyway. The gathering was in the backyard of my uncle's house. Folding tables, plastic forks, mismatched chairs, kids running barefoot on patchy grass. I stayed near the edge, nodding at people, hugging cousins who acted like nothing had ever happened. I was pouring iced tea when I overheard it. "She's making all that money now," someone said behind me. "But did she even help when Theta had that surgery?" Another voice chimed in. "She stopped calling too. Fame goes to your head real quick, I guess." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The voices were familiar. Aunts. One of them had knitted me a scarf when I graduated high school. The other had once driven me home from a late shift when my car died. I set down the pitcher, pulled my phone from my pocket, and walked to the side of the yard where Bryony was sitting. She was scrolling through something, earbuds in. "Can you do me a favor?" I asked. "Take a photo of everyone here." She blinked up at me. "What for?" "Documentation," I said, managing a small smile. "Just in case anyone forgets I was here." She hesitated, but raised her phone. Clicked the shutter. I didn't smile. Later that evening, back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and pulled up the website for the Vantrell Foundation Gala. My image was still there. A headshot I'd never approved. A quote they'd never asked permission to use. I filed a takedown notice with the hosting platform, attached screenshots, provided timestamps. Then I opened a blank document and began drafting a cease and desist. It was precise, formal, no emotion. I didn't send it to Maris directly. I let it go through the channels. No texts, no phone calls. The thing about warnings is, if they're ignored long enough, they stop being warnings. They become boundaries. I left their house with a folder under my arm and a silence in my throat. Not the kind born from hesitation, but the kind you carry when every word you needed to say has already been spoken and ignored. By the time I pulled into my usual parking spot near my office downtown, dusk had deepened. I didn't go home. I took the elevator to the 11th floor, the motionless kind of quiet hanging over me like a fog. The front desk was dark, but the office itself glowed faintly, motion-activated bulbs flickering as I passed. Yvette was waiting for me inside, her blazer folded neatly over the back of a chair, a legal pad resting on her lap. "You're going to want to sit down for this," she said, already flipping to a page. I didn't. "There's a transfer of deed document filed in your name," she explained, "dated 11 months ago. It moves the Eastfield property into something called the Graves Family Trust, and that's not your signature." I exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. "Show me." She slid the printout across the desk. I didn't even need to study it. The loops in the signature tried to mimic mine, but the slant was too wide, the spacing too perfect. I'd signed enough documents in the haze of long days and tired hands to know what my real handwriting looked like. This wasn't it. "Who filed it?" She tapped her pen. "Maris submitted it, with Vernell's notary stamp. We matched it to previous records." So that was it. They hadn't just asked, they'd taken. Boldly, quietly. Yvette tilted her head. "Do you want to escalate this now or hold?" I answered without thinking. Now. The next morning, still riding the chill from what I'd learned, I walked into my bank for what should have been a routine check-in on a wire transfer. Instead, a flag popped up on my profile. A loan. 120 sort. In my name. I leaned forward. "Excuse me?" The branch manager, a soft-voiced man in his 50s, pulled me into a side room. "It's tied to a bridge loan on a residential flip, secured by a signature authorization document from your personal file." I hadn't authorized anything. I hadn't co-signed. I hadn't even been asked. They had used an old ID, a copy of an address form from 5 years ago. I'd given them access once, when I trusted they wouldn't weaponize it. They did. I walked out of the bank with my jaw clenched and my accounts locked. I filed a fraud report within the hour. That afternoon, I called every institution my name had ever touched and gave one instruction: separate me from them. They had turned my name into currency, and now that currency was going to be cut off. By the time I reached their house again, I wasn't shaking, I wasn't rehearsing. I walked through the front door without knocking. They were in the living room, Theda folding laundry, Vernell staring at the television like it was more important than my presence. Maris was leaning on the kitchen counter, scrolling her phone. I didn't wait for greetings. I placed 2 printed documents on the coffee table. One was the forged deed transfer. The other, the loan application. "This ends now," I said, voice steady. "You've made the last withdrawal from my name." Theda blinked, then stood slowly. "Ilara, we didn't mean—" "You never do," I cut in. "You just take, and when you're caught, you call it family business." Maris laughed under her breath. "Are you seriously doing this? Over a piece of paper?" "No, over a dozen," I said. "Over a pattern. Over the fact that you forged legal documents and took out debt under my identity." Vernell finally turned to face me. "You're blowing this way out of proportion." I took one step forward. "If you ever use my name again, on anything, I will bring this into a courtroom, and I will not flinch." The room went still. Theda reached out, her hand soft and shaking. I didn't let it touch me. "Don't confuse my silence for forgiveness," I said quietly. "Not anymore." I turned, walked out, and shut the door behind me without looking back. By the time I got back to the office, the sun had already dipped behind the taller buildings. The air had that early evening thickness, quiet but not restful. I didn't sit at my desk. I didn't take off my coat. I walked straight to the back, flipped on the private line, and dialed Yvette. She picked up on the second ring. "They're not done," I told her. "I don't think they ever intended to be." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was angry. I'd passed that stage months ago. But because I could feel the shift coming. You know the kind. Like before a storm hits, when the wind stills, but the clouds hold their breath. The next morning, it arrived. It started with an anonymous email forwarded by my assistant. Subject line, image versus integrity. Inside, a single line in bold. "Your image matters more than your attitude. Tulsa Talks. You should too." I didn't need to guess where it came from. The sender was cloaked behind a generic domain, but our IT security flagged the IP, registered to a residential address that matched my parents' home. I sat with that for a moment. Not out of surprise, but because I knew what came next. I called Yvette again. She didn't even wait for pleasantries. "What now?" she asked. "We trace, we log, and we start the paperwork," I said. That same afternoon, my voicemail was full. One message had the same ominous tone. "Failure to honor familial duty will lead to a public appeal for restitution." Restitution. That was the word they used. 2 days later, a video surfaced in a local Facebook group. A snippet from a keynote I gave 2 years ago at a women's tech conference. It had been meant to encourage people like me, those building with scraps, alone, unseen. The clip had been sliced to sound like this. No one helped me. I had to do it all alone because they weren't capable. Out of context, it sounded cruel. In truth, the full line had been, "No one helped me at the start, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't believe. I had to prove I was capable first." Didn't matter. The damage was done. The comment section filled fast. "She sounds bitter. Ungrateful daughter, hope her parents disown her. People like her forget where they came from." I watched the flood of strangers dissect my life from behind keyboards, none of them knowing who they were defending. I didn't respond publicly, not on Facebook, not with a press release. That's what they wanted, me dancing in the mud so they could say, "See, she's not who she claims to be." Instead, I made 3 calls. First, to Yvette. We filed a takedown request, citing defamation, unauthorized editing, and malicious intent. Second, to my PR advisor. I authorized a one-time article, a long-form piece in the Tulsa Independent. No accusations, no dragging names through the dirt. Just truth, clean and sharp. Third, to myself, because that night, while brushing my teeth, I looked into the mirror and said aloud, "They're not after justice, they're after control." And control, I'd learned, doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it's smiling while slashing your tires. Sometimes it's pretending you're still part of the family while they sharpen knives behind your back. That week, The Independent ran the feature. No headlines screamed betrayal. No names dropped. Just a simple story about how building something from nothing often costs you more than people think. It ended with a quote I chose myself. "The story you tell may get you sympathy, but the truth I hold gets me peace." They didn't respond, not in words anyway. But the silence? It was loaded. It was calculated. And I knew it wasn't over. The silence didn't last. It never does in my family. 2 mornings after the article ran, I opened the front door expecting a package delivery. Instead, a man in a suit handed me a large white envelope and said my name like it was a warning. "Ilara Montlow?" I nodded. He gave a tight professional smile and walked away without another word. Inside was a summons. A civil suit. Plaintiffs, Vernell and Theda Graves. The claim? Emotional distress. Financial abandonment. A direct violation of Oklahoma's Elder Responsibility Clause. I sat down at my kitchen table, still holding the envelope, hands flat against the wood like I was bracing for an earthquake. I read it twice. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just read. They'd turned family into litigation. I scanned the contents slowly. They'd listed expenses I had never agreed to cover, exaggerated years of emotional burden, and argued that I had publicly disrespected those who raised her. I called Yvette. "They're suing me," I said. "My parents, my name, in court." There was a pause. Then she sighed. "We'll file the response." The news didn't break me. It hardened something, solidified a truth I had been circling for years. They were never interested in reconciliation, only leverage. Later that afternoon, I pulled into the parking lot near Yvette's office, not ready to go inside just yet. I sat there, fingers resting on the steering wheel, when my phone rang. It was Bryony. "Hey, Aunt Elle." Her voice was soft, uncertain. "Hi, sweetheart." There was a beat of silence. Then, Mom said, "If you don't settle, I can't go to college." I felt something heavy slide into my chest. "She said you're tearing the family apart, that you want to make them suffer." I swallowed the ache and kept my voice calm. "You shouldn't be in the middle of this, Bryony." "I know," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to call. I don't know what to do." I closed my eyes. "Bryony, listen to me. You don't owe me anything, and I don't owe them my soul." She didn't speak again, just breathed on the other end. I could hear her trying not to cry. After we hung up, I sat for a while, engine still running. Eventually, I went upstairs to Yvette's office. I signed the counterclaim, not for revenge, but for protection. That night, I opened my financial software and began the formal severing. I froze every shared account connected to inheritance, backtracked through every document with my family's name tied to my brand, and initiated a full legal lockout on the use of my identity in business. No more loopholes, no more blind spots. Then I wrote the final cease and desist letter to the board of my sister's nonprofit. It was not emotional. It was not petty. It was closure with a timestamp. "You don't get to weaponize my compassion anymore," I wrote at the end. When I finished, I poured a glass of water, sat at my kitchen counter, and just watched it. The condensation trailing down the glass, the quiet hum of the refrigerator behind me, the echo of my own breathing in a room that no longer felt like a war zone. They hadn't left me. They just never saw me standing. I didn't sleep much the night before the panel. I didn't pace. I didn't rehearse. I just stared at the ceiling fan, moving in slow, lazy circles, like it had all the time in the world. Meanwhile, I felt like I was standing in the middle of a fuse, and someone else had already lit the match. The community forum was held at the Civic Center downtown. Not the glossy auditorium used for concerts and ribbon cuttings, but the smaller chamber tucked off the side, the one used for PTA meetings and city zoning arguments. That felt fitting, honest, unpolished. I was invited quietly, no fanfare. A private email from one of the event organizers. "We know your story matters, even if people don't want it told." I arrived 5 minutes early. The room was already filling up. Local news cameras lined the back wall, volunteers adjusted microphones, and the hum of conversation felt charged, like everyone sensed something was about to be exposed. They just didn't know what. I didn't bring anyone with me, no team, no lawyer. Just a manila folder and a calm I'd earned the hard way. When they called my name, I walked up, steadied my hands on the podium, and looked out at a room full of familiar strangers. Faces I'd grown up with, teachers I hadn't seen since 10th grade, neighbors who once asked me to babysit their kids but hadn't spoken to me since the lawsuit. I didn't start with a greeting. I didn't thank anyone. I just breathed and began. "Sometimes," I said slowly, "when people can't get to you in private, they try to break you in public." A few people shifted in their chairs. "I'm not here to accuse anyone. I'm not here to defend myself either. I'm here because silence has limits, and when you don't speak, people start telling your story for you." I paused, let that sink in. For over a year, I've watched my name passed around like property, used in lawsuits, in rumors, in campaigns I never supported. I've been called selfish, arrogant, ungrateful, and I stayed quiet. Until now. I opened the folder, took out my phone, and plugged it into the AUX line the staff had prepped earlier. I didn't look up when I hit play. My mother's voice filled the room. "You don't need to come back, Alara. There's nothing for you here." It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The silence that followed did more damage than shouting ever could. I waited, then spoke again. I didn't leave them. I respected their wishes. No one moved. I could feel breaths being held. Someone near the front put a hand to their mouth. I've been painted as the one who abandoned them, but they were the ones who handed me the brush. I didn't say more. I didn't need to. I left the podium the same way I came, quiet, measured, steady. Outside, the wind had picked up, the kind that moves trash cans slightly and scatters leaves without warning. I wrapped my coat tighter and walked straight toward my car. A reporter stepped in front of me, microphone raised. I shook my head. "No statements today." I heard her try again, but I kept walking. As I reached the lot, a voice called out from behind. It wasn't loud, but it cut through. "Alara!" I turned. It was Mrs. Redmond, my old Sunday school teacher. She looked smaller now, her shoulders more sunken, but her eyes were just as clear as I remembered. She handed me a folded note. That was all, then turned and disappeared into the crowd. I didn't open it until I was seated, engine still off. You didn't have to explain, but thank you for not hiding. That was it. 7 words that landed deeper than anything said in that room. I sat in my car for a long while after that. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just let the stillness wrap around me. Because some stories don't need an audience. They just need to be told. The next week passed without incident. No follow-ups, no public statements, not even a whisper from anyone in the family. It was like someone had quietly pulled the curtain shut behind the last act. The silence wasn't cold. It was vacant. And that, somehow, was worse. I was in the middle of proofreading a grant proposal when Yvette called. She never called unless something was final. It's over, she said simply. They dropped the case. No response, no counters, just gone. I let the words settle between us. No explanation? I asked. Not a word, she replied. They just let it die. There was nothing left to say. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't read the legal notice she forwarded. I archived the email, deleted the notification, and closed my laptop. I didn't need closure written in legal language. I'd already written my own. Later that evening, as I watered the plants along the windowsill, I noticed how much they'd grown. Some of them I'd nearly given up on, convinced they wouldn't recover after overwatering or too much sun. But they did. Quietly, steadily, without apology. That night, an email pinged in my inbox. It was from Bryony. No subject line, just a few lines in the body. I didn't believe everything they said. I still want to go to college. I just didn't know what to do. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a plea. It was honest. And that made it land harder than any of her mother's speeches ever had. I opened a folder from my desktop, scrolled through my documents, and attached a PDF. A scholarship award letter in her name. Fully funded. My reply was short. You don't owe me thanks. Just promise not to become like them. I clicked send, then leaned back and looked at the ceiling. I wasn't sure if she'd reply. I didn't need her to. Some things are better left without punctuation. Around midnight, I walked into my home office and paused by the wall. There, in a simple black frame, hung a photograph I hadn't told anyone I had printed. It was from my company's soft launch party, the night our platform finally went live. I was in the middle of the group, laughing, hand mid-gesture, surrounded by my team. No filters, no stylists, no forced smiles, no family. It used to bother me. For years, I'd convinced myself that every big moment needed their presence to be real, that without their witness, it was somehow incomplete. But looking at that photo now, I saw something else. Proof. Not of success, but of self. I didn't frame it for validation. I framed it because it was mine. I turned off the lights and walked back to the kitchen, the sound of the hallway lamp clicking as it cooled. I made myself a cup of tea, not because I needed comfort, but because it had become a habit that reminded me I was safe. Sitting at the table, hands wrapped around the mug, I thought about all the versions of myself I'd shed like skin. The daughter who stayed quiet, the sister who gave too many second chances, the woman who waited for apologies that never came. I didn't hate them. I just stopped returning to places that kept proving I wasn't welcome. And that, I realized, was peace. Before we end this story, let me say something from my heart. Woman to woman, person to person. If you've made it this far, then maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've had to walk away from people you once loved, not because you stopped caring, but because they refused to see you standing on your own. Here's what I've learned. Forgiveness doesn't always mean letting people back in. Sometimes it means letting go of who you thought they'd become. And peace? It's not always loud or celebrated. Sometimes peace looks like sitting in your own space, with your own truth, and not needing anyone to validate it. I used to believe family was about who showed up at the table, but now, I believe family is anyone who respects your boundaries and never weaponizes your silence. So let me ask you, have you ever had to walk away to find peace? Have you ever been blamed for setting boundaries they never honored? I want to hear your story. Drop a comment and let me know. Have you been the Alara in your family? Or maybe you knew one? If this video resonated with you, if even one moment hit home, leave a 1 in the comments so I know you felt it. Tell me where you're watching from. And hey, if you didn't like it, that's okay too. Let me know why. I'm always open to hearing different views, because stories aren't meant to be one-sided. They're meant to start conversations. If you'd like more true-to-life stories like this, filled with heart, healing, and a little fire when needed, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss what's next. Your support helps me keep telling stories that matter. Thank you for being here. Until the next one, stay grounded, stay kind, and always choose peace when it costs nothing but your pride.